Are you getting them to stop the scroll within that first couple of seconds? And if you're not, it all becomes irrelevant if people just scroll past.
Exactly.
If you start with quality, you know what it's not good enough to post, so I'm going to revisit it.
And that's another barrier that gets in people's way, that perfectionism.
The mistake that a lot of people make is solely chasing trends, and then no one really knows why they would follow you.
It's very true.
Confusing visibility with influence is so pertinent because how many creators do we know that have over 1 million followers, i.e. a lot of visibility, but then can't sell a product? I promise you, 1,000 people engaged in a 2-hour long form piece of content with you is way more powerful than 10,000 people that have just seen a 15-second short, or even 100,000 people seeing that. Okay, here we are. Let's kick it off. Another episode. Today, obviously, we're going to be going through the 10 biggest mistakes in social media that we're seeing right now. I should intro you, Head of Comms, 1DS Collective, Mackenzie Collins.
Yeah, nice to be here. Good to be in LA.
We flew you all the way over from Australia.
Just for this episode, actually. No. But yeah, it's good to be here. We are going to talk about the 10 biggest mistakes, especially kind of pivotal right now, being that it is end of year. I think people go into 2026 with a bit of a new strategy in mind. So we're hopefully going to equip everyone with what they need to know and have top of mind.
Exactly. So let's dive in. We've got some notes in front of us, so we'll kind of refer to those. The first one I like because there's a bit of a debate, right? So posting more instead of better is the debate. Should you be focusing on quality or should you be focusing on quantity, or is there a time and a place for both, right? Now, I'll go first because I'm very big on inertia. And a lot of the clients that we've worked with and that we've worked with over the years, that initial inertia of just getting over the fear of posting, the fear of people judging, whatever it might be, but whatever the barrier is to stopping people from actually just getting into a consistent cadence. And we've seen it so many times. And so I am a big advocate of actually starting with quantity and just getting over that initial inertia, like I said. Thereafter, I will admit, but quality needs to come into the fold for sure. But I am of the thought that if you start with quality, I've seen it give people too many outs. You know what? It's not good enough to post, so I'm going to revisit it.
And that's another barrier that gets in people's way, right? That perfectionism. And then it's like, oh, I can't post anything this week because it wasn't quite to that level that they set for themselves. So I get your debate. And I do appreciate that, especially from I think we've both had our own creator journeys. Yeah. And when you've experienced that yourself, you have a different view on it, right? When you're in the agency side and you really appreciate strategy and the importance of it, you can almost forget that we're humans at the end of the day. And sometimes we do just need to get over that barrier to just starting a pattern, starting a new habit. It's like anything, right? Like sometimes you just need to get the brain working through that pattern. And even getting okay with like posting something, it doesn't perform. Okay, that's lessons, that's an opportunity to learn, and that's feedback. And that's how we grow and refine the strategy anyway. But another argument to that kind of debate is that without strategy, what are you posting?
Mm-hmm.
You're not actually, sharing any particular message, directing your audience in a particular way. You're just dropping something out into the ocean and hoping it performs, right? So yes, you've got over that inertia of I've hit post, but something me and John talk about a lot is you're congratulating yourself for that, right? You have a little self-party almost of I hit post, I've done the thing. And then you do it again and again and again. And what a lot of people don't do is get to the stage where they pivot then and go, I need to stop congratulating myself for just posting. And I need to start to work on the strategy, start to understand my message. What am I trying to get out there? And how am I actually compounding that message over time? And that's the quality argument.
It's true. It's the signal and noise model, right? To your point, a lot of people, when you're just posting, you're typically just posting noise. It's random. It's going out into the ocean of other pieces of content that contribute to the overall noise in that space. But there's no real strategy backing it. And therefore, is it actually going to penetrate through that noise and therefore be a signal towards whatever it is that you're trying to communicate. So I'm fully aligned with that. I think in a nutshell, there's no real debate to that part, right? Like at the end of the day, noise for noise sake or volume for volume's sake, it's the same.
Views for views' sake.
Vanity and just, I mean, how many creators do we know? How many creators have we worked with that command millions of views, but then don't actually generate or convert that into anything? And it is the definition of a vanity metric at that point, because it's literally meaningless. It might make you feel better. Like that's about it.
But a lot of the time they're starting from scratch again, right? In the sense that because they didn't put a strategy into it from the jump, they don't know how to replicate it again. So it's like, let me try again tomorrow. And then I'm disappointed again when it doesn't work. And I'm constantly trying and trying again to chase what I'd created there. But I don't even understand what I created there.
Yeah.
And that's like the cycle of burnout that we discuss in things like authority as well.
Yeah. The burnout is real when all you're doing is chasing those vanity metrics, because the beauty when you shift to a strategic model and you're aiming for signal over noise is that your metrics become more real and tangible, whereas the vanity metrics, and we've seen it even with good performing posts, sometimes there's other factors at play that might just contribute it to not getting as many views as you want. Or it could even be platform specific. We've seen so many pieces of content perform really well on this platform and not so much on the other. So you end up being at the mercy of all these other things, these other factors that are typically outside of your control. Whereas when you turn inward and you look more at a strategic and a conversion base and the metrics that actually matter, am I moving the needle on my own, core conversions or whatever it is that I'm trying to move people towards in my own funnel or business model, that you can actually stand behind. And then it becomes less important as to if it got 10,000 views or 100,000 views. It's actually, well, did it land with the audience that I wanted to speak to? And did it do the thing that I wanted to do, right? Did it make them to take a certain action or whatever it might be? So I think we're aligned on that part. And it's not to say we're not aligned on the initial. I think to sum that up, it's probably individual specific, right? You've got to take a look at the person. And if you're watching this, you have to have that level of awareness yourself, with yourself, to be able to say, actually getting over that initial inertia and fear of judgment, fear of posting, or just holding myself accountable to posting consistently. You're either there or you're there. And you have to be real with yourself to take that inventory and say, no, this is actually going to be more beneficial for me to just spend 6 months getting consistent. And then I can worry about getting really, really strategic. Or you're already that person that has shown yourself time and time again. When I say I'm going to do something, I do it. I've proven that. You don't have to worry about the inertia stuff as much, so you can then start on the strategy earlier at that point.
Exactly. It's kind of like, what's your real weakness?
Yes.
Because I think some of us, I can even say that at times where I've been fine to show up, that it's like, am I actually putting the thought into how I'm doing it? And I can be honest with myself in that moment of my weakness isn't the fact that I can't press post and just, off it goes. It's what is it? What is that serving? What's that actually building towards? Yeah. So I think it is having that kind of reflection moment with yourself of like, yeah, which is the area that I really need to focus on right now?
Agreed. All right. Moving on. Number 2, chasing trends instead of building IP. Arguably in some instances ties into the initial conversation, obviously.
Yeah.
It, dare I say it, because I love bringing the frameworks and the models into this. And I think the more people around us and even audiences become familiar with those frameworks too, the better. But to me, my mind goes to Sparkler and Bonfire, because it's kind of like, there is a time and a place for both. There's actually a time and a place to genuinely try to gain top of funnel awareness, sparkler content, viral content, use whatever, terminology you want, but the goal being to get as many eyeballs into your ecosystem as possible. The trick or the tricky part with that a lot of people stumble on is focusing just on that side of things and then not having that bonfire content, not having that IP to then convert someone or turn those eyeballs into something. right? So there's a time and a place for both. Whether you go 80-20, 20-80, 50-50, I think that's going to be subjective to the account, the audience,
Your goals.
100%. There's so many different factors into play there, and that's going to come over time. A little bit of testing, maybe as well, get that data. But I think the mistake that a lot of people make, it's the more common thing because it's tied to the vanity metric that we were talking about a minute ago, is solely chasing trends, and then no one really knows why they would follow you, other than this person's making me laugh, or
Mhm.
But is that then going to move towards your goals?
Well, it's like I immediately think of when that format trend hit Instagram, where people were posting like this very
Letterbox, right? Yeah.
exactly. And for some people, they did it incredibly well, right? And they made it work for their brand.
Yeah.
That was a classic example of somebody actually utilizing this trend as a sparkler, throwing it into the bonfire. But there were other people who just took a random video, put it into that format. There was no point or reason as to why that video should function in that format.
Yeah.
And hoped for the best, and probably got more unfollows than follows because it wasn't creative. It didn't actually, tie back to their main message whatsoever, that it was just annoying. That's it.
Yeah.
So that's a classic example of you're not actually gaining anything. You're not gaining credibility. Nobody's looking at you like, oh, wow, you're really ahead of the trends if you're not translating them to a purpose.
100%. I think it also dives into like, what are you known for? I mean, the last thing I'll just say to that, and it really just piggybacks what you just mentioned. If you are using that example, right? If you are a creative brand or you're selling something that has creativity tied to it, I would be going all in on that trend, right? To your point, it's adding to what you already offer. Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. Someone's going to see that and be like, wow, I see what they've done there. They've taken a trend and they've added to it because it makes sense for their brand. Great. I'm going to consume more. I'm going to even reach out because these guys are awesome. Um, if it has nothing to do with your brand and it's just a random thing, it's like any other trend. And again, circling back to the initial number one mistake, is that it just becomes noise. It becomes noise on your own page. That creates more confusion than clarity, right? So yeah, it's not going to benefit anyone.
Totally agree.
Cool. All right, let's look at number 3 here. So number 3 is believing editing is the problem. I like this one a lot because I think that a lot of people look at not just editing, but in this instance, editing, but I think they look at the wrong problem, right? So it's like, I want something to blame. I'm going to point that energy towards the editor in this instance. But what you'll often find is an idea is made or broken in that initial stage, the ideation stage. Is it a good idea or not? Fundamentally,
Yeah.
does it make sense? We've had so many clients that the editing is actually trash, but it performs really well. And sometimes the editing is irrelevant because the delivery might be just an authentic talking to camera piece. It might be them outside just, filming themselves on a walk. But I think the mistake here and why we've got it as number 3 is this belief that editing is going to make or break the video. And I think in this day and age, especially with the TikTokification of algorithms, which I mean, we're now like years into, this isn't even like a new thing. I just think that excuse is played out and is dangerous because it's going to send you down the wrong path.
It's very true. And I mean, it's the same thing. It's like, is it editing that's the problem? Is it the idea? Sometimes people can point to the idea, scrap the idea, and it wasn't even the idea. It was actually usually the middle. I think most of the time the problem is that something dropped in the middle. There was no pre-production as such, right? And even if you are a creator and you don't have an entire team doing this for you, you still need to think in this way of, did you script it? Did you have a hook? Did you have almost multiple curiosity loops that then created this interest throughout and this re-engagement throughout? Or did you just have an idea, jump straight to execution, and then it didn't land and you said, it's the idea, or I edited it poorly, and you didn't actually have a storytelling structure whatsoever?
You actually, within all of that, there was a lot of value, but the biggest one that jumped out at me was the hook component as well. Because we are at a point now, when you listen to the experts in the YouTube space alone, they're talking about spending damn near more time on a thumbnail than they are on the execution of the video itself at this point, because CTR actually matters, right? You got to get the person to click through and watch the video. The same thing then happens on snackable short form in the form of the hook. Are you getting them to stop the scroll within that first couple of seconds? And if you're not, it doesn't actually matter how good or bad the editing, even the rest of the concept is. It all becomes irrelevant if people just scroll past.
Exactly.
So yeah, there's so many different layers to it, but I think as a really strong mistake to try and avoid is believing that editing is the problem, when what we just discussed, from hook, from ideation phase, from curiosity loops to keep people engaged in general, they're going to rank way, way higher on the list of importance and priority than the editing itself.
Oh, man. Next one.
Okay, so number 4, we've got confusing visibility with influence. This, it really ties into the vanity conversation.
Which is a huge one and drives a lot of people. And I think it's interesting because this comes back to the whole we're humans at the end of the day. And a lot of us can't pretend that that doesn't impact us. But we do need to ask ourselves, what does that actually lead to?
100%. I think I try to relate this back to clients because we have so many different examples. So you could look at your fitness creators, your health and wellness creators, your biohackers, your doctors, and we work with a plethora of people within that space. And so now you're getting into the world of courses. Some of these people literally host events for thousands and thousands of people. Some of them are launching their own products. So all of these different sort of opportunities lie within social, because ultimately for all of them, their businesses are built on social media through awareness and then taking people down the funnel, obviously. But in this instance, confusing visibility with influence is so pertinent, because how many creators do we know that have over 1 million followers, i.e. a lot of visibility, but then can't sell a product? And this then goes back to signal over noise. Like, these things all tie together fundamentally, but the importance of spending time focusing on what actually matters, and what actually matters might be different for different people, and that's totally fine. Like, I always say that when we bring a client on, what do you want? Because we have had clients that genuinely just wanted the vanity metrics.
Yes.
And that was totally okay, because they had a thriving business, but the issue that they had was that they wanted to be able to DM celebrities to gain recognition that they could ultimately then eventually leverage in.
Yep.
They weren't actually trying to get notoriety for the business. The business was doing well as an entity itself, but when they were emailing or DMing, they weren't getting any response.
Yeah.
And so we worked with those people to build their profile, and then sure enough, they're rubbing shoulders with industry elites. But I will say that's a rare one.
Occasion, yeah.
Mostly it's, hey, I have a business and I need to grow this profile so that I can convert that into something.
Exactly. Because even if you're a creator who's interested in gaining sponsored deals and you don't have kind of a business and offer outside of your page, you're still going to feel that drop off when it comes to, okay, now I've promised a brand a certain outcome, or I've shown them that I can, bring in this amount of reach. But the moment I then go to tell my audience, connect with my audience over a product or an experience, nobody cares because they haven't actually connected with you. They don't know what you're about, or they don't care, unfortunately, because you gained that visibility through whatever some other means, right? I mean, we often talk about the way that just because you do have this, large following doesn't always mean a lot. Sometimes some of the smaller micro creators have the most intimate communities and real influence because they have, and this is going to tie to something we speak about later, but chosen to speak to these this unique group of people and speak to them very well, as opposed to trying to reach the masses, maybe diluting their message in the process and not being known for something and therefore not being influential.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the saying is, if you try and talk to everyone, you're ultimately talking to no one. Because what matters to a person, a profile, a specific avatar is very unlikely to matter to others. It's why you see such disparity in politics. It's why you see such disparity in, every industry, because what matters to a 30-year-old dude probably doesn't matter to a 70-year-old female, or you know what I mean? And you go there. So I think definitely the confusion of just trying to talk to everyone, and I've got a million followers, without really getting into the specifics of what that message is and connecting with that audience, it becomes irrelevant. And the last thing I want to add to that as well is, and we'll probably get to it in a moment, but it is around the ownership of your audience. Because at the end of the day, if this audience is a million followers on Instagram, like you don't actually own anything around that audience. You don't know their email addresses, you don't know their cell phone numbers, you have some idea of analytics from like a gender and age breakdown and so on, but like there's not a whole lot you can do with it. It's why ManyChat has become so important and powerful for people to be able to actually start connecting with people through newsletters and things like that. So anyway, number 4, confusing visibility with influence is a big one. Our main focus point is to try and avoid those vanity metrics at the end of the day. Like, focus on what actually matters for your business, for your growth. And 9 times out of 10, it's not how many views your video's got. It's actually how deeply are you connecting with that audience that they can then trust you when you do have a call to action, whatever that might be.
Number 5, no content system, no chaos. So this kind of comes back to the thinking editing is the problem. It's, realizing that if you don't have a system, you cannot repeat any positive behavior, right? So if you've got a top performing post, but you don't have a system behind it, you just cannot scale that. So that often leads creators to being in this kind of single drop mindset, as opposed to, we often talk about having series or even any sort of behavior that can compound that growth over time. And I don't think many creators think in this way.
Very few. You know what's really interesting around this is I love like quotes of industry, right? And like YouTube is now the most watched streaming platform on television, right? It's surpassed Netflix. It's surpassed all these other streaming platforms on television. And when you look at that trend, the irony and the interesting part of that is that YouTube especially, but you're seeing it in short form as well, audiences wanting to consume created content in formats of series, for example. And so if the consumption rate has increased, which it has, right, then people start to go to their favorite creators. You're not going on to watch your creators on YouTube and then just jumping from video to video to video to video. What you're typically seeing is people binge watching the creators that they love the most. You might have your top 5 podcasts that you listen to. I highly doubt that you listen to 50 different podcasts and it's like a complete crapshoot every time you load it up. You're probably going to your favorite few, as am I. And so the idea around like an actual series and formats not only translates really well from a viewership standpoint because it's what the audiences are familiar with, it's what they want, but it also then allows you to scale.
Yeah.
Because you're no longer just having to make up completely new stuff on the fly every single day. You have a series.
And
You
have no idea how it will land as well. Yeah, whereas there becomes some level of predictability if you've got, well-performing episodes that, okay, people are bought into this journey, they're probably going to come back. It's going to be that higher return rate as well for people to tune into the next one. It's like audience psychology doesn't change, right? Just the medium or the format does. And this is like, you can look back at television, you can look back at movies, the fact that we have sequels and freaking the third, the fourth, the fifth, because there is that element of like predictability. Audiences want predictability. They want to know they're going to get some sort of emotion or value or something that they got the last time, but they don't want it in the same way. Not the exact same way. They want to know they're going to get it, but slightly repackaged. So that's why you've obviously still got to take them on a journey and evolve that journey. If it was no evolution, then people would drop off.
Yeah.
So you got to find that perfect balance of like predictability, but evolution at the same time. And that usually forms a pretty robust content system.
Couldn't have said it better. I really couldn't. One of our larger YouTube clients, Drew Dirksen, he's built these series of I built, I tried, so you know what you're getting. I love it when he does his I built. He built an electric car, or he built a driving toilet. Like it's every time the packaging fundamentally is the same, but the medium of light and the delivery of that within it is different. It evolves. The stakes get higher. The ideas get more and more ridiculous. But at least from the audience perspective, they know what to expect. And equally from his perspective, it allows him to come up with the ideas easier and know what to expect. It's not like, oh, is this going to perform? Isn't it? Like, no, you know it will, because the last 5 in that series perform really well.
Yes.
So you have evidence to suggest that the 6th is as well.
And he's got the story structure there, right? So if he says, I built this, it's like he knows to introduce the idea. Then maybe there's a struggle along the way. How on earth is he going to do this? He has to bring in a team, whatever. So there's already that format of like, I know it's going to go through this, and that. I just don't know the details.
Yeah.
And so I'm here for the details. And that probably makes it even fun from his perspective of like, that's going to feel new each time to create as well.
100%. The takeaway here is ultimately to be able to create something that you can scale. Like, to me, that's what it all actually comes down to. Not just in terms of your own sanity and speed and ability to, like you said, repackage existing things so you haven't got to reinvent the wheel every time, but it's also the only way to scale. If you're having to reinvent the wheel every single time, you can't build a team around that, because they're also trying to catch up with every new idea that's coming in. It's going to break every single time. So that number 5, no content system, just chaos, will create chaos and havoc across everything from viewership, audience, and your own ecosystem. So I think that's a really big one. Okay, number 6, ignoring audience psychology. Now, we've spoken about psychology a fair bit here in general.
Yeah, I think that ties on very nicely, is that really is what we just spoke about, in the sense that it doesn't really change. It is much the same. And so therefore, to ignore the fact that audience behavior is what it is, despite the fact that algorithms may change, the formats may change, the mediums may change. At the end of the day, what people expect doesn't.
Yeah. And what lands doesn't change. Like, as much as we want to make out, like, even from a movie direction standpoint, that these movie directors are incredibly innovative, and a lot of them are very creative in the way that they package things up, but they take you on the same journey. It's what you described in the previous one. Like, the journey is often the same. And that's why things like nostalgia hit, right? Because it's ultimately familiarity. If you can package something up around familiarity, then you already know that an audience is likely to resonate more with that, because they have that pre-existing familiarity. If you're introducing something new every single time, there's just so much guesswork around that. And you're never going to have any predictability around your content, how it's going to land, how it's going to perform. But in terms of, ignoring the audience psychology, there's so many different layers within that. So nostalgia is a lever that you can pull around psychology, in terms of like content ideation, for example. But we haven't even touched on audience psychology from a standpoint of scrolling, like we talked about earlier, in terms of you've got to hook someone.
What's going to make them stop?
And then what's going to make them stay? Like, the whole journey through not just what is the idea from a concepting standpoint, but the actual execution in the scripting side of things, whether it's a talking format piece of content or even just a visual entertainment piece. The same principles of psychology still apply, right? The person has to be engaged to the point where they want to stick around for whatever the payoff's going to be. Maybe there's a struggle. Like, the actual delivery mechanism is going to change in every single instance, but the fundamentals of psychology, audience psychology, is always going to stay. And then the last part I want to add to that is like, it also ties back to the signal over noise side of things. Because if you're just putting out noise and information, then from a psychological standpoint, the audience has no reason to do anything with that. It's
Mhm.
like, cool. Like next. There's no engagement, there's no follow through, there's no conversion, there's nothing there of any actual substance. Whereas when you start tying in sort of actual psychology principles of hook, get them engaged, and then by the time you get to the end, it's like not just the payoff, but like what do you want them to do? That hence the CTAs. Like there's formats and terminology around all of these, but fundamentally it's like take person, like stop them in their tracks, right? Get them along the thing of interest and then get them to do something.
Yes.
How you do that is up to you. But in terms of the principles psychologically, there's like proven marketing frameworks around this sort of stuff.
Well, you've got to hit some sort of emotional desire,
Mhm.
right? So that's how you were saying information for the sake of information does nothing for anyone. But if you're hitting something I want,
Yeah.
need to solve in my life,
Yeah.
feel insecure about, that's a big one, then I'm listener. I'm stopping the scroll to engage in some way. And this is why some people get so caught up on, oh, I want shares, saves, DMs, etc. How do you create that? Well, what makes someone save a post? What makes you save a post? I think like that's the easiest way to put it always is start actually auditing your own behavior.
Yeah.
Because we've been talking about lately, especially, it's much harder to even glean a like these days. Like we see so much, we consume so much that we're giving out these things, far more sporadically. We're just, you know, we're almost all a bit burnt out from even using social media, that we're being a bit more reserved about when we like something, when we share something, especially because it is such an inundated space, which means you have to fight for that a little further. You actually have to tap into people's emotional states of being even further, even more successfully. So, how can you do that? And that's where understanding your audience to a T is so important.
Yeah.
If you're speaking to yourself, ask yourself that.
That is such a great piece of advice because it's so tangible, right? And you can sit there and you say, okay, during my scripting process, I'm putting this together, and my opening hook is going to be, I don't know, how I made $1 million, or how I crossed $100,000 per month within 8 months. Which of those are you going to be more, or how I got rich you know what I mean? Like, how broad do you want this to be? How specific do you want this to be? I know myself, I'm going to want a more specific hook, because then I can put myself in that box and say, yeah, I do want to cross the 100,000 and I do want to do it within a certain time. That's going to hook me way more than this broad statement of like how I got rich. Like, and you can translate that to any scripting process, any ideation process. But you're absolutely right. I think you as a proxy and as a measurement metric, whether you are the ideal avatar or if you can just put your feet in the shoes of the ideal avatar is such, I mean, what a low lift, as long as you're just down to take the time to actually look at that.
What's why as well, we always see when people go through big chapters in their lives, we talk about this on social a lot, things like marriage, breakups, like these highly emotional days, they're very specific. People know what you're going through, and if somebody decides to document one of these things, it's easy to share that emotion, and oh my gosh, is it a universal state of being.
Yeah.
But it's like there's a through line in there that you can tie to anything. It's like, how do you take that same, raw level of emotion and very specific emotion and translate that to anything else you're trying to communicate?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Okay, cool. So that's mistake number 6, ignoring the audience psychology. I think we broke that down quite effectively. Number 7, as if I didn't know it was coming. Talking to everyone, resonating with no one. This is a big one. It's not just in terms of content, it's in terms of marketing in general. This has been since the days of old of any style of communication. It's why we always start with who are we trying to talk to? That is fundamentally question number one. And if you haven't done that, whether you're a brand, a personal brand, regardless, if you're looking at producing content or you're looking at selling a product or a service, you need to start with who are you trying to do this for, right? What problem is it solving, and whose problem is that solving? There's absolutely no point, to your point earlier, there's no point in just putting noise out that doesn't actually represent or isn't relevant to that particular audience. So, the specifics that we kind of dive into in terms of our frameworks is like being able to, number one, just define that first and foremost. Personas is one of the more effective ways of doing it, because you can typically break out 3, not too many, 2 or 3 specific personas, audience people. Like, essentially, that's a fancy way of saying like target audience, a person, right? What's their
Like a
age?
person.
Yeah. Where are they? What language do they speak? What do they think about? What motivates them? The more specific you can get, the better. And then from
What are they
there,
doing right
100%.
now? Even when you post at 9 a.m., what are they actually doing? Are they driving to work?
Yeah.
Are they likely to, if you're deciding to put out a podcast and you're speaking to a specific audience, are they actually listening to a podcast at 9 a.m.? You've got to even tailor your schedule around theirs.
Absolutely. Yeah. Messaging, everything. I don't know that a huge amount needs to be touched on that. I think really it's a fundamental at the end of the day. And the reason we've got it as number 7 here is because a lot of people forget about it. It ties back to what we were talking about with the vanity metrics. People would rather see 1 million views, and it's like, but was one of them your ideal like avatar?
Totally. The one thing I do want to say, which I think we forget and actually clarifies a lot, is as much as you are talking about, or we're talking about, defining who you're talking to, also your enemy.
Yeah.
Who are you not talking to?
Yeah.
And I think people are scared to select that.
Or even like uncover it or admit it.
And even if you're the most optimistic creator in the world, you have an enemy, right? Now your enemy is anybody who's pessimistic, right? So identifying that is going to help you a hell of a lot, because that's what's going to create those very polarizing hooks. Because now you have a stance. Everybody has a stance, and don't be afraid to take one, is what I'm saying, because that actually allows you to talk to your audience even further. Because when you start to speak to what you don't believe in, people are going to go, hey, me too.
Me too.
You know?
Yeah, because they likely have the same enemy.
Exactly.
Okay, number 8. Right, we are rocking through. We've only got a couple left here. So, outsourcing accountability. So, the breakdown that we've put here is teams can support execution, but the founder must drive the vision, the perspective, and the creative intelligence. And I think what that really roots in, and the reason we've kind of put it in here, is because a lot of the time, especially we experience it with clients that have met a certain threshold, is that it's very easy to want to outsource everything, to be honest with you, from ideation to content creation to editing. And that's obviously an important part of scaling. But at the same time, if you outsource everything, you run the risk of losing the initial vision of what's holding it all together. And it's why what often happens with creators that meet that certain threshold and then surpass it is that they start to fall off, if you will, is because the content starts getting diluted, because it's no longer being led by that initial visionary. I'm trying to
starts to lose a stance.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, we can't decide what stance a doctor takes on something. So if we don't have that, it's harder to choose that polarizing side that then again does create connection with people. But when you have that coming directly from the expert themselves, well, then it allows us to actually hone in that narrative once again.
Yeah, I think this is a public thing that Nick Bear even spoke about, so I don't think it's any taboo. I heard it somewhere, so it must be. He spoke about, because he's got his brand of supplements and their whole tagline of "Go One More," and it's really cool. It was built around this hybrid athlete messaging, and I think a lot of people bought into that, myself included. I resonate very, very deeply with that. I've got some of his products, in fact, he spoke about how he'd got the business to a certain level and then did exactly this, right? Brought in outside support, which totally understandable. I believe, if I remember right, they even moved the factory or the distribution portion to another state or something, where they just had one step further removal of control, right?
We were on a CMO at the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So brought in these different team members, and it's not to say that I don't think he said they were good or bad. It was just that they weren't able to then further the same vision, and it became diluted. And the audience are going to be the first to notice it. And you see that with a lot of like Gymshark went through their own, and I'm obviously just using some health and wellness and fitness brands as examples, but they're just proxies to this exact issue of outsourcing accountability. And it goes all the way down to content creation.
Yeah.
Mr. Beast has done a really good job of being able to keep the control of his content ideation, but then he'll go on podcasts and talk about how he's working 30-hour days. I know that's not possible, but you know what I mean? Because how else? Right? Like everything's scaled so big. The only alternative that he has is to start placing in new people in these things, but he runs the risk of it becoming diluted as he does that. So he has to stay so heavily involved.
Yeah. Well, Gymshark was a perfect example because as they grew, they started to take on that inclusivity messaging, right?
Yep.
And everyone was a bit unsure, a bit like, is this Gymshark? You guys were all abs, all,
Yeah.
physique 5 minutes ago. And that kind of had its moment, right? And then they realized this isn't the core of Gymshark. We've actually become like everyone else,
Yeah.
a very mainstream, very bland, no stance brand. And we're actually starting to lose the people who fought for where we are today.
Yeah.
And so they essentially rebranded again. I know they lost a lot of their athletes, a lot of influencers at the time. There was a bit of uproar about that. But ultimately, they have started to build a very clear stance that they can scale again.
So true. Perfect example. And I believe that was Ben Francis himself, CEO, founder, having to get back involved because all for good reason. What a great, messaging standpoint. What a great thing to support inclusivity. Nobody's going to fight against that, but it wasn't Gymshark. It wasn't the core of what made them who they were. And so by doing that, they just alienated the people that had supported them to get to where they were. And it took him having to get back involved in saying, hang on, we need to go back to our roots. We need to go back to who we are.
Just from the jump, they were saying, we're unapologetic. We care about
Yeah.
physical appearance. And that's why we've got these stringers that we were known for from the jump.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And that is outsourcing accountability at that point, especially the vision. So, okay, number 9, we're almost there. We've got no long form strategy. I like this one a lot because we spend a lot of time in the world of long form. We spend a lot of time on YouTube. We now spend a lot of time with live streamers, podcasters, and so on. And so I always go back to this. And it was actually Alex Hormozy that said this because he was speaking to Jimmy, Mr. Beast. And they were talking about how they were at a live event and they put people on the camera on the Jumbotron. And they were receptive to the audience's reaction to those individuals as they came on the Jumbotron. And it was a very influencer-based event. So your TikTokers, your Instagrammers, your YouTubers, streamers, and so on. And they literally described how when the Jumbotron fell on the TikTokers, everyone's like, yay, and like there's a cheer. Okay, great. But it wasn't like an uproar. And then as it progressed, you start seeing some of the Instagram people and the cheers were a little bit louder. And then the YouTubers came on and these cheers are really, really deafening. It's like, it's the YouTubers. And then the live streamers came on and the whole place erupts. And it's this direct correlation with how long you spend with that person. Yeah. Because like, how many 15-second videos would you have to watch of someone to get the same amount of time with them as a 2-hour stream? Like it's a huge.
There's also a lot of room for assumption about that person for you to project your own experience.
No continuity. No continuity either, right? Every piece of content, if each 15-second, 30, it's just a random short, but you're spending a stream like a 2-hour time, 4 hours, even longer sometimes. Like you're going to get to know them every crack, every moment, every sort of emotional reaction.
When a celebrity does like a biopic as well, and suddenly everybody's on their side after for about 2 years they've been bagging
Yeah.
them, you know? And it's like the moment there was enough time to see that this person is human, does, just get up and go to the shops like I do. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
actually, there's room to connect.
I love that. We always say there's a time and a place for both, right? That's why we lean into short form. And when I look at the funnel, it's great for awareness. It's why streamers are leaning into clipping, right? It's why there is a world where we take a podcast, we clip it up into 30-second viral moments, and we publish those on TikTok and Instagram. And we want that virality, we want that familiarity, we want that awareness. But in terms of actually driving conversion and actual intent to take some form of action, nothing beats long form. And so, number 9, no long form strategy is such a huge mistake that we see a lot of people make. Typically, again, it funnels back into that vanity metric where it's like, oh, but I want to go viral, and it's typically easier to do that on a short.
Time.
Yeah, you got it. You got to build this audience. You got to nurture it, and I promise you, 1,000 people engaged in a 2-hour long form piece of content on with you is way more powerful than 10,000 people that have just seen a 15-second short, or even 100,000 people seeing that.
I have a question for you because I know you've recently started heading into long form a bit more. So, from the creator side, what would your advice be to someone entering the space right now? Would you say go straight into short form and long form, or would you say master short form, then go into long form? Or
Yeah,
stance
good
be there?
question. I think my answer comes more from the clients that we've worked with in that instance, because candidly, we have worked with, at this point, over 200 creators in various different ways. My personal experience, which I'll just touch on briefly, I've been to conventions recently where people have come up to me and they saw a LinkedIn post that I did, or and that was interesting for me to experience because I don't have a huge audience, don't have a huge following, haven't even put the time and energy into building that because our role is building others. But it was very interesting to see that these impressions can translate to those real life moments. However, the main thing in our world, at least as an agency, is our accolades that speak more for us because we did X, Y, Z with a client. And then, we were featured on a Netflix documentary, Liver King. The amount of inquiries that we get, and the first thing I say to them every time is, how did you hear about us? And it's like, oh, I watched you on Netflix. Of course.
Yeah.
And no matter me getting 1 million views on a short is never going to, supersede that kind of power. But to your question specifically, having worked with all these different creators, brands, people, and personal brands, there's a time and a place for both. YouTubers are the ones that I relate this to most because they've been able to effectively make that transition, or at least the combination of the two. Because a lot of clients that we still work with still only do short, and we're trying to get them to that long, but it's a heavier lift. It requires more resources, typically has a higher cost attached to it. So, but those that have been able to either make the transition or combine the two, far over index the success of those that haven't. Every single time, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind. I think I used Twin Home Experts as an example. These guys are rodent stoppers. It's not a huge industry. It's not no one's rushing to Netflix to go and watch rodent trappers. But they have somehow built an incredibly successful ecosystem, not just selling products through their website, selling courses at this point, getting invited internationally to different countries to show people and other businesses, industries, how to, solve rat problems, both in commercial industry and in residential. The pillars of revenue that have been opened up from them being able to go viral on short form and then funnel people into, in some instances, 1.5 hour long episodes on YouTube.
Crazy.
1.5 hours. And that level of intimacy and engagement, I can't point to anything that supersedes that. And obviously they're one of many examples of clients that have been able to make that jump from short form to long form, and been able to leverage the success off of that. So, I could go into all the different layers, but from a business standpoint, there is no doubt in my mind that if you can make that success on short form and then transition into doing long form. I don't know that there's a more potent mix.
For anybody trying to build authority as a personal brand, jumping from short form to eventually, hopefully, being invited to podcasts, speaking engagements, and things that really cement your authority on a wider stage, sometimes industry centric, but sometimes beyond that. It's a big jump
It is.
to go from being confident to execute on short form to then presenting yourself on longer form stages. So it's almost like from that, again, creator perspective, having that familiarity with presenting whatever your specialty is. And even if it is, 5 to 10-minute episodes on YouTube, not necessarily the hour and a half to start, it starts to bridge that gap where, we'll get clients ready for podcasts with talking points and get them really familiar with how they present their message. Like they know it back to front, but it's another thing to then present it to audiences for an hour straight. So even having that kind of pattern of, okay, I can sit down, I can, talk to camera for a bit longer. I'm comfortable in my skin to present like that. It does prepare for that next stage.
Oh, it does. Yeah. And the barrier to entry is so much lower for short form, right? Because it literally, you can pick up the phone, film for 10 seconds, post it, and it's done. That is literally it.
Or not even talk to camera.
Yeah. It could just, here's my food today. Yeah. Anything.
Yeah.
You literally can't do that. Long form, by the nature of it being long form, it needs to be at least 10 minutes long to really be able to say, I did a long form piece of content. So the barrier to entry is so much lower for short form. And the other way to look at it as well is, I don't know a single long form creator or brand that doesn't also have short form. However, you can point to many, many, many short form creators that have never been able to bridge into long form. And so I think just looking at it through that lens of the barrier to entry, and therefore, typically, if it's a higher barrier to entry, there's less people doing it, which means there's probably a higher payoff because you're one of very, very many in the short form world. Sure, there's a lot of people doing long form now, but when you contrast the two, I could only imagine what those numbers would be. I'd actually be very interested to know. But okay, so we're into our last one here. This model now is just really all about no proof. So this is an important one. It's also a really tricky one to navigate because if you are new, a new brand, a new agency, a new company, a new content creator, whatever it might be, you're not going to have any proof, right? Like one of the biggest things, and I go back to Alex Hormozy, and it was really interesting because in the business space, he broke through, right? Signal broke through the noise in that space. And a large reason for that, and he was very open and transparent about it, is because I've done the thing. The thing that you're trying to do because you're watching my content, i.e. you're trying to build a business, I've done it. So much so that I sold it for $50 million. So much so that I actually don't need your money. I've got proof that I've done what I've done. It's public knowledge. You can, here's the check if you need to see, he did the thing. And I think the power of that propelled him through so much more effectively than the whatever age, business guru that has no proof case. The old way of showing proof was through, the guy that would rent the Lambo. And you would trick the audience because, oh my goodness, he's got a Lambo, because audiences were new. They didn't know that it was just a rental, or, you know what I mean? So you could get away with these different things. But the reality is it still runs in the psychology of proof, right? That's your case study. This is my success. Look at what I have.
But if people are watching that over time, now they'll notice too, where's the Lambo?
Oh, yeah. I think it's probably got to the point now where it's so common knowledge, right? People just see through the bullshit now. So you're not going to get away with those.
And they're waiting to call it out.
Yeah. You're not going to get away with those cheap tactics anymore. And so once again, proof becomes even more important, like real proof. Case studies, awards. I actually did this for X amount of people. And so I think just being able to have proof, number one, of your service and your offering and your product and what you've done. Let me just kind of break down a couple of examples because proof spans a lot of different things, right? So in the business space, we'll work with supplement companies, right? How do they illustrate proof? Well, there's clinical studies that you can bring to play. There is developing a board of medical advisors on your company that are going to vouch for this. Oh, this person is a accredited medical expert. Okay, proof. Like, these are all ways if you do it. Sure, 5-star reviews, and like there's so many layers to what proof kind of bakes into. So that's on the brand, product, service side. As with the example that I gave with Alex Hormozy, his service, get people in. Ultimately, he's now upselling them into his courses and his books and his acquisition.com and so on. But that again was built off of the proof that we discussed. But proof also, even down from a content creation perspective, comes within yourself. And I love the framework of confidence and being able to, like, what is the definition of confidence? Well, it's you being able to show yourself that you have been able to do the things that you said you were going to do. That's really what it is, right? Like, I said I was going to go to the gym 5 times a week. I did. Therefore, I have confidence that I am a person of my true to my word, and that, evolves into everything else that you do. Content creation is no different. I am the person that said I was going to produce 3 pieces of content this week, and I did. And so I think the power of proof to yourself in the space of content creation is a really, like, undervalued thing, because it ties back in where it's like, oh, but I didn't get the million views. And it's like, but you proved that you could do the thing. Like, the million views, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, worry about that another day. Like, the goal wasn't that. The goal was to prove to yourself that you can do this, and then turn that into a month, then turn that into a year, then okay, then now we can start worrying about views. Now we can start worrying about very specific
And then bake the
audience.
strategy in. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think as well, something we've spoken a lot to about a lot to with our clients is in terms of content strategy. A lot of times people will say, well, I've already said that.
Mm.
I've already shared that I am, uh, you know, the leading, for example, Dr. Dom, leading biological dentist. He didn't say that, by the way, but this is an example. You assume that once somebody's in your ecosystem, they know everything about you. They've watched every piece of content. They consumed that study that you shared back 20 posts ago. Yeah. And the reality is it's just not true, because once again, the space is inundated, but also people forget. People don't remember what they watched 5 videos back.
Yeah.
So the importance of then even entering a new video and reinstating your credibility just could not be emphasized enough. And yes, do it in different ways, as you're saying. Bring in those clinical studies, because that is different than bringing in a testimonial from a real human who says it in real words. You know what I mean? Like, there's the medical side where if you're in that space, that's medical credibility that is backing you up, that the industry says you are good at what you do.
Yeah.
But then people also want to hear, if I am booking at your clinic, that I am going to get a great experience, that I'm going to have whatever problem I want solved actually solved from a, again, very human, even emotional perspective. And so those proof types serve in different ways, and you couldn't say that one is more valuable than the other. They both need to come in at different points.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I think you hit the nail on the head. And Gary Vee is a huge proponent of that as well, right? He really has 3 messages, and he has been producing content for over a decade, probably 2 at this point. And he still only has 3 core messages. And he is open about the fact that I am going to keep saying these things in a million different ways, because every time I say it, it lands with 1 or 2 people, and they finally wake up to what my message is. And so I think, the amount of times that we have a client that is like, oh, I don't want to produce another piece of content about that particular message. And it's like, firstly, a fraction of your audience saw that video. Secondly, we're going to package it up in a different way anyway. Thirdly, basic principles of marketing in general is you need to see something multiple. They say 7, but I mean, it's multiple times before you actually take some form of act. I mean, the data around that is unbelievable. But I think the no proof framework and just stacking proof is a really important one. It is around the messaging, to your point. I think it's also a lot of the other things that I touched on before as well. And it's all of the above, right? It's, have you got reviews? Have you done before and afters? Have you, whatever the industry is, whatever, even if you're just a content creator, there's ways that you can stack proof.
And how is it tying to your message as well?
Yeah.
Gary Vee is a great example because he often shares, this is him back in 2009 with his wine business, and that is proof in and of itself. When he says just post to you, he's done that.
Yeah.
Not once, not twice, hundreds and hundreds of times. And so you go, you can't fight it.
You can't fight it. It's got the proof. It's there. It's documented.
Exactly.
All right. I love it. This was a fun one.
It
It
was.
was a really fun one. So if you're still sticking with us, thank you for sticking with us because it was a long one. But yeah, 10 of the most sort of biggest mistakes that we're seeing in social media right now. So I think there was a lot of value in there. And we should probably circle back with some of the opposite, if you will, and some of the successes and the good things that we're seeing in social.
In 2026, yes.
Yeah, we should prep
It's going
for
to
that
be a
one.
big year.
Cool. All right.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.